So in yesterday's web dev tip, we set up a copy button in preparation for the user being able to copy the short URL that they're generating, but we didn't actually create the functionality for that, it's just a button. So we need to set up an event listener in our TypeScript code so that when we click that, we're actually going to copy this text, this URL, onto the user's clipboard. So we're going to do that in our main.ts file that we've created, which is where all of our TypeScript and ultimately JavaScript code is running. But first, before we do that, let's actually just create a specific ID for that copy button. We can obviously select it via the class as well, but let's just keep it in line with everything else that we've done on the page. And we'll just say we've got this copy btn ID on the button, and then we can target that in our TypeScript. So just as we've done in some of the other elements up here as well, we'll just create that as a reference and save it into a variable there. So we'll say the copy btn, for example, the result of the get element by ID function, and of course the ID that we've just created is copy button. So let's just close up the event listener here for the action button, because we're pretty much done with that for the moment. So with the copy button that we've just referenced, we're going to add an event listener to that, and of course it's going to be a click event again. And we don't need to worry about the event here, so we've just got an empty anonymous function here for the moment. And inside here we can run code when the user clicks that copy button. So the code we're going to run is actually we're going to call a function on the clipboard API that's available on the window of the browser that we're working in. And some older browsers might not support this, but for the purposes of our tutorials, this should do fine and cover most browsers for us. So we're going to go to the window object, and there's a property on there called navigator, which is in itself an object as well. And then we're going to select the clipboard object, which is the clipboard API, which allows us to do things with the user's clipboard. And then we're going to call a function called write text, which will basically just write the text that we want to the user's clipboard. So it's almost like it's doing a copy, and then that will be available for the user to then paste wherever they need to go. So in the URL result div, we'll have the actual URL itself, but don't forget in the last tutorial we put the copy button in there as well, so that makes it slightly more complicated. But we can select the text that's just inside of the URL result div by just targeting the span. If you remember just from the event listener from yesterday, we're adding in a span with the result.url inside there as the text. So we should be able to just select that and then pick out the text that we need. So we do that something like this. So we'll say URL text, for example, and save that in as a variable. And then we'll use the URL result element, and then we can use another query selector on top of this as well. There's nothing with an ID in there, so we do need to use a query selector this time. And we'll just select the span that's inside of there, and then just to finish off, we'll get the text content. Rather than getting the HTML element itself, we'll get the text content that's inside of there. So we should be pretty safe to do this when we click the copy button, because you can only ever see the copy button once you've actually generated a URL and that text content is there, and the span element is there as well. So this should be pretty safe to get the text content here. So what we're going to just write that URL text inside of there. And now when we click the copy button, we should find that we're getting the text content from the span and then putting it onto the user's clipboard. Let's just save that and go back to our app. So if we now go and create a new rickroll, you can see we've got the URL there, and if we hit the copy button, if we then go and paste, if I could do a Control V to actually paste that onto the page, you can see I've actually just copied that URL from here, and now it's available on my clipboard. So that's all working as expected. It'd be nice to give some visual indication to show that that's actually happened, the copy process has happened. So if we keep clicking copy, obviously it'll run that code over and over again, but the user's not 100% sure that that's actually worked. So let's go and just change the text inside of here when the user clicks the copy button. So we'll do that inside of the event listener here. So we've already got a reference to the copy button itself. So we can say copy button dot text content is equal to copied, for example. So now this time, if we go back and create another rickroll and then click the copy button, you can see the text changes there to copied. It'd be nice if it changes back after a few seconds as well. So let's put a timeout in there just to actually change it back. So in JavaScript here, or in our TypeScript, we're just going to set a timeout. And inside there will be a function. And all we're going to say is the copy button dot text content is set back to copy. Okay, and how long do we want to do that for? Let's just say 2 seconds is probably long enough before we set that text back. So if we just save that and try it out one last time, create a new rickroll, we click copy, it says copied, and then it should go back to copy after 2 seconds. So there are obviously lots of different ways that you can do this. You could put an alert or some notification to say that the action has been successful, but for our purposes it'll just show us that the interaction, that copy process has happened, and the user can then take away that URL and paste it into wherever they need to. So there you go, we've got a functioning copy button now. In the next few tutorials, we're going to start looking at how we can give the user some choice, because at the moment in our API, the redirect will only redirect to one specific video, the Rick Astley video that we picked out, but it'd be nice to give the user some options in terms of selecting different places to send the user. But that's it for this tutorial. Make sure you stay tuned for more web dev tips.